want to talk a little bit about the evolution of house moving dollies and maybe how we got to where we are today. Up to a certain size of house or any kind of load, you just get a bigger truck with a bigger trailer, bigger, wider trailer that you could load it right on. Because of the size of houses and maybe the shape, the different configurations that houses have, they don't always fit on a conventional trailer, so it became more practical to put some kind of dollies or wheels underneath the house. First of all, when you jack up a house, you usually put in a set of beams or lots of different beams, different directions, and typically in just a medium-sized house, you would jack that up with 4 jacks. In this case, we got some cribs, what we call cribs, with crib jacks in them. And for the initial pickup, you would pick the house up usually level or straight, all evenly so that it doesn't twist it or crack it. And somehow you've got to get this house onto a set of wheels that you can pull down the road without it twisting. And the easiest way to do that is with 3 points of support. So when you first jack it up, you've got the four cribs, and then you need to transfer the house to 3 points so that when you're going over different size hills and bumps and different shapes, the house can lean over and lean forward and back, but you don't want to twist it. So the first, some of the first things that we did, first of all, during the 40s and 50s, one of the good uses or one of the good resources for trucks that you could move houses with were old military trucks. But the what we used to call the deuce or the 2.5 ton 6x6 army trucks were pretty popular and pretty fairly easily to buy on surplus after World War II. There was a lot of 6x6 military trucks, which were kind of slow and heavy to just be for driving on the road, but for moving houses, they could pull pretty good and they could do well off road. And so it just made a really good thing to use on house moving jobs. And along with that, some of the first dollies we made, we got some axles out of some 2.5 ton army trucks and put some wheels on them. And so that was some of the first and very common way to make dollies for the back was to make them out of old army truck axles. And then this particular design here, fairly simple, is you jack up the house with the 4 jacks, and then we would put this beam across the front, which we called the bolster, and then we would back the army truck underneath the front, and quite often they would have like 5th wheel hitches on them, like semis do, and hook that up, and then we would set it on the wheels in the back. So at that point, once you've removed the jacks, you've now got the house sitting on 3 points. Here's a house being moved that we did. You can see the example of what I was just talking about. We got the front bolster sitting on top of the wooden beams with these great big bolts that are bolted up, and then the bolster sitting on top of the 5th wheel of the truck, and that was typical of how a lot of the houses were moved. Here's another example. In this one, you can't see the bolster as easy because it's probably tucked up there further back into the house, but the same idea. One of the disadvantages with this, or one of the limitations, I should say, is it was great for pulling down the road and maneuvering like a truck and trailer, but sometimes you got to maneuver the house in some pretty tight spots, and you got to turn some pretty sharp corners, and you were limited now because the truck was attached to the house, and you couldn't go anywhere that the truck couldn't fit. And you couldn't turn very sharp, because as you tried to turn sharp, the sides of the truck would hit up against the beam. And another thing that was also a disadvantage is, as you were going down a really narrow road and you had to miss a telephone pole or a mailbox, it was hard to adjust the house sideways at the last minute or very far, because it was stuck hooked to the truck, and you were kind of restricted by whatever the truck could move. Here's another example of the bolster being on top of the beams, and the truck backed in underneath and holding it. And in fact, you can see from this picture that it looks like it's on quite a hill with things in the way. It gives you an example of how difficult it might be to move this house around, because you're restricted by the truck being attached, and you can only take the house where the truck can drive. So for the second generation of dollies, we still continued to use the 2.5 ton military axles, because they were a good source, and they were interchangeable with the wheels and tires and stuff. But in this case, instead of using the full 920s or 1020 39-inch tall wheels, we got some what we call low bowie wheels, which would fit the same 6-hole Bud wheel, and we put on airplane tires. And these airplane tires, like 15-inch wheels with airplane tires, and airplane tires are like 32 to 36 ply. They're very flexible, like for driving over big chunks of concrete or up over big pieces of wood and blocking. And we put like 100 pounds of air in them. They would hold the weight, and plus they would be flexible enough to go over the rough ground. And so that, and they were also lower profile than the big Army truck tires. So now it would ride lower. And then we built this dolly. So instead of putting the truck underneath the front bolster, we built this first dolly. And the dolly now takes the place of the truck, and it's got a little axle on the front that pivots like a little trailer. And then you can pull the dolly with the truck, and so it goes down the road just as well. But now you can unhook the truck from the dolly, or from the house, and you can turn the truck around and use it to winch. You could turn the dolly sideways, and you could maneuver it a lot better. Here's an example. In fact, this might actually be one of the first jobs that we did with the new dolly. This was, I think, on one of the islands, and we were moving these cabins onto these barges. And so in this picture, you can see you got the back of the Army truck. It's hooked onto the dolly, and the dolly is on the front of the house. And so here's a picture of them pulling the house up through this narrow area. And as you can see, the truck is not connected to the house, but in fact it's turned around, and you got the winch line pulled out there and pulling the house in that particular spot. And here's another picture I showed on my last video. This is my dad riding on the dollies, and so you can see what the dollies look like for that job. Here's the Army truck pulling the first dolly, which has the bolster on it and the 4 wheels, and then there's 2 single axle dollies right behind it. They were hoping to get all 3 dollies completely built for this job, but by the time the job needed to be done, we still had 1 dolly and these 2 rear axles. And here's the barges that they were all put on. And once again, I just wanted to point out the idea that having that dolly on the front gave us a lot of flexibility in terms of moving the houses into their final locations, especially if they've got tight things around them, like the edges of the barge or other houses next to them. It just makes so much difference when you had that front dolly separate from having the truck under there. And then for the third generation, we've taken the same second generation dolly that we had before, and we built 2 more. So now you got the same dollies in the back. And another thing that you may have noticed here is I've moved, instead of having the front bolster sitting on top of the beams and being bolted on, it now sits underneath. And because of the low profile tires that we have underneath, we have enough height. And a second feature that we've done is, instead of hooking the front tongue directly onto the hitch of the truck, we have this tow bar. And the tow bar then connects from the hitch to the body of the dolly, and the tongue can be disconnected or dropped down and then steered separately from the tow bar being pulled. So for example, if you were to be driving down the road, pulling it with the truck, and you came across some really tight spots, let's say there was a tree or a telephone pole, something that was really close, and then at the last few feet there you had to steer the house left or right. In the previous phase, you couldn't have done that with the truck connected. So now you can just drop the tongue down, you can steer the front dolly separately from the truck, and then you can steer it by hand to the left or to the right and go through a really tight spot. And then once you're past that, you can hook the tongue back up to the tow bar and continue on your way. And another advantage with having the 3 dollies is that once you get to the site where you're going, you can unhook the truck completely, take the tow bar off, or take the extension tongue off, and now you can rotate the dollies around any direction you want to go. You can go completely sideways, you can flip them around and go backwards for pulling onto a foundation or some really tight spots. You're not restricted by having the truck having to stay connected. The truck can just drive. In fact, the truck can drive around and pull on the house from whatever direction it wants to, or if it has a winch on it, it can winch the house up into its final location or off to whatever direction. Here's a picture, not a very good one. This is me actually back in the 80s. I didn't take very many pictures when I was moving, but in this case we jacked up the house and we put all the dollies sideways or 90 degrees, and then we pulled it off of the foundation. This is actually the front dolly turned 90 degrees until we get it off the foundation, and then once we get it that far, then we can hook onto it and just pull it around and as we go forward with the house.